Hello, Daphne here with an interesting video for you, which is my history of all the different airplanes that I have flown in my lifetime, including one that flew before I was born. And the video is titled Fabulous Flights to Cattle Cars, a brief history of planes. The incredible technology advancement of commercial airline flights and this world traveler's takeoff. I have flown over 3 million miles worldwide in my lifetime. I thought it would be interesting to look back on the incredible advancement in airplane technology over that time period. I was not born when the first airplane flight took place. It took off from St. Petersburg, Tampa area on what was called the airboat line, crossing Tampa Bay in just 23 minutes on the day, January 1st, 1914. The airline, unfortunately, only lasted for 3 months. Anyway, that was the first commercial airline flight, according to historians. Next, we have my very first plane ride was on a luxury Boeing 377 Stratocruiser from San Francisco International Airport to New York City. The year was 1949. My father had just passed away. My mother was moving us back to the East Coast from San Francisco because that is where her family was from. The plane was luxurious. We dressed up to travel in those days, so my twin sister and I had on beautiful dresses, patent leather shoes, Mary Jane shoes, and we looked like we were going to a party. The flight took over 11 hours from San Francisco International into LaGuardia. This is a picture of the actual Pan Am flight we were on, taken as we departed by a very dear family friend. Our father had died a few months before. My mother had moved back east, leaving us with our grandmother in California. My twin sister and I were off on our first flight. The dear friend of my father's had given us a bag full of presents. We were to open one every hour. Doing so, she felt, would make the time on our flight seem shorter. So thoughtful. During the 1950s, airlines promoted commercial air travel as glamorous, and it was glamorous. Way back when, stewardesses served full meals on real china, airline seats were large with ample leg room, and passengers were always well dressed. No tank tops allowed. In the late 50s, we flew on this Boeing Stratocruiser to Haiti, where my father was charge d'affaires of the American embassy there. My first transatlantic flight was from Idlewild Airport in New York, Kennedy Airport now. It was a nonstop flight to Brussels, Belgium. That was a memorable trip because I went to meet Nastya. I shouldn't say meet, but see again my nanny Nastya, our Russian nanny, and also my mother's Russian nanny when she was young. Nastya was in a camp for Russian refugees in Belgium. Ours was a touching reunion. She had not seen me since I was 3 years old. When I left, I knew I would never see precious Nastya again, and I did not. I remember the days when there were grooves on the meal trays to keep whatever was there from moving around during turbulence. As a side note, I also recall a trip when my twin sister and I struck a stray dog on a plane when we were flying from Scotland back to the United States. The little abandoned puppy, given us as a gift by an Irish friend, didn't make a peep the whole trip. When we touched down in New York, we made it through customs with our four-legged friend without a moment's worry. Oh my goodness, have things changed since those days? We'd probably be put in jail for doing something as egregious as that. In 1968, my husband and I flew on a French Caravelle jet from London to Paris. My husband sat on the aisle, I sat in the middle, and at the window was a Vietnam veteran who was a pilot. And he described some interesting days in Vietnam during his time of service. Our Caravelle jet took off with no problem. Then, at a low altitude, it sounded to me as though the engines had been turned off. I dug my fingernails into my husband's leg spontaneously, and also the veteran pilot next to me. Oh, I was so embarrassed. But I got into a conversation with that pilot, and he said, "Ma'am, if you only knew the safety controls that pilots have access to on these planes, you wouldn't be one bit scared." He said, "We had nothing like that on the planes that we flew in Vietnam. We flew by the seat of our pants." Anyway, that was an interesting conversation, and I was very pleased to meet this wonderful man. And I can tell you, on that trip, those were the days when I had a fear of flying. And I think it was because I had 4 little babies at home, and I was worried something would happen to me and be unable to return to those precious little things. They were just so important to me. Of course, as we all know, the next major advancement in flight was not for everyday passengers like you and me, but instead a historic 240,000-mile-plus flight when Neil Armstrong's capsule went towards the moon and landed on the moon, the first human being to do such. An amazing feat of not only technology, but courage and grit. And I remember sitting in front of the TV in 1969 and watching nervously as the entire saga unfolded. Amazing, amazing. Oh, this was such a magnificent plane, the Concorde jet. Oh, I thought it was just absolutely gorgeous. A supersonic, passenger-carrying commercial plane built jointly by manufacturers in Great Britain and in France. The Concorde jet, a gorgeous-looking plane in my opinion, made its maiden flight on March 2nd, 1969. This technology-advanced aircraft had a maximum cruising speed of 1,354 miles per hour. Also a Mach 2.0, twice the speed of sound, cutting 3 hours out of the trip between New York and London, England. In 1982, I had a chance to fly on the Concorde, and I was so excited I was about to turn inside out. It was from New York to London, a long-planned business trip. To my total dismay, just a week before we were scheduled to take off, the trip was canceled. A chance for me to fly on this magnificent flying machine never came again. And to this day, that makes me very sad. The McDonnell Douglas DC-10 is an American tri-jet wide-body airliner. While working in New York in the 1980s, I cannot tell you how many DC-10 flights I took between New York and Los Angeles. This is a wide-body plane and a very comfortable one. Almost stopped flying them at one point because there were a number of crashes and a number of very bad safety incidents. But alas, I kept on flying these wide-body wonders because theirs was the most convenient schedule for me on American Airlines. And here I am today recalling all my hours in the air. The 747-8 is the world's longest currently operational passenger liner. I remember my first flight on this jumbo jet was in first class on a business trip to London. My seat was on the upper level. Wow, I thought I was in seventh heaven with such comfortable seats and first class, no less, paid for by my company. Oh, I felt like I had a little special place on that plane. Since then, I have been all over the world on 747s. Unfortunately, my last flight was a British Airways flight from London Heathrow to New Delhi, India. And the plane was shabby, and even though I was again in first class, it was nothing like that first trip way back when on those luxurious planes when they first came out. The plane was so old and worn. The glamour of the 747s was gone for me. That's too bad. Introducing the 77X. This new Boeing plane will be the world's largest and most efficient twin-engine jet. The interior is designed to feature spacious cabin with a double aisle. That's good because there'll be more than 400 people on board. Not in service yet, but scheduled for certification in the fourth quarter of 2023. There you have it, one gal's history of flight. How amazing to have experienced aircraft advancement over so many years. Wonder what airplanes will be capable of doing or looking like 100 years from now. I won't be able to answer that question, but one thing is for sure. It will remain an awesome way of travel, and I suppose someday this form of transportation will take us to other planets in the universe.